And myself, like most members, I have been impacted by breast cancer in that my mother is a survivor and she was diagnosed when I was away from home for the first time at university. Very pleased to say that she is still with us. And today, one of my colleagues and friends in the Liberal Democrats in North East Fife, Cllr Fiona Corrs, is currently stable after undergoing treatment for lobular breast cancer. She messaged me today to say she started her new meds yesterday, but I do want to note that it's only 2 years after her daughter's leukaemia fight. This is a woman and a family who have been through a lot. And because of Fiona's diagnosis, that did bring me to speak to the Lobular breast cancer campaign. The unmet clinical need of lobular breast cancer means the chances of it spreading are incredibly high. And for indeed many that have been diagnosed, it has already spread by the time of their diagnosis. And I think it's important to note, Mr Betts, that this year will mark 50 years since doctors first knew that lobular breast cancer was its own distinct condition. And here we are 50 years later in a world with advances that were unimaginable back then, but we have painfully little progress on the diagnosis and treatment of lobular breast cancer. And as others have referenced, it isn't like what we think breast cancer is. As a woman, I've been taught to check for lumps. Obviously, my mother's experience made that more acute. But lobular cells grow in single lines that spread out over tissue. If you did a lump check today, the chances are you wouldn't spot it. And even more worryingly, if you go for a mammogram, it probably won't show up there either. And as others have referenced, 22 people are diagnosed with lobular breast cancer every day. But the reality is, as many have talked about already, we don't know how many people might be living with the disease, getting progressively more ill without treatment. As of today, we still understand very little about it, and there are no dedicated treatments for it. And I'm conscious that health has devolved. I'm standing here as a Scottish MP, but given the Minister's responsibilities, I will note that the Government's recent Cancer Action Plan for England didn't mention lobular breast cancer. I know we can say that other treatments are available, and obviously Fiona and others are taking other treatments, but the reality is they are hit and miss. I have engaged with the Lobular Moonshot project, and indeed the Honourable Member for Horsham, my honourable friend's constituent Tristan, and the story of his wife Susan. She had 8 different generic breast cancer treatments, none of which worked, and this lack of treatment frankly kills people, and that is why lobular breast cancer is so relevant to a debate on secondary breast cancer, because not enough people know what to look for, because it doesn't show up on tests, because it's therefore undiagnosed late, and when it is diagnosed there isn't a dedicated treatment pathway for it. It's a recipe for cancer spreading, and we've heard what that diagnosis of secondary breast cancer means. Unsurprisingly, there is still a lot we don't know about what happens when the cancer does spread. We do know that it can spread to areas other cancers don't like to, such as the outside membrane of the spine. We also know that the cells can lay there dormant for years before starting to spread again. And what we don't know is why any of this happens, how it can be identified, or indeed how it could be stopped. But Mr Betts, there could be hope. There are researchers around this country, as others have referenced, ready to take on this challenge. Importantly, there is cross-party support for getting this done. It is probably one of the most bipartisan campaigns in the history of this place. I know that the Liberal Democrats are behind it. Our leader, my friend, the Right Honourable Member for Kingston-Surbiton, asked the Prime Minister about funding last summer. And indeed, I asked the then Secretary of State for Health just recently about the project. He suggested then that the money was there to fund the project, but that work was needed on the programme of research. And I would say to the Minister that that is not how those involved with the project see it. As others have said, 20 million over a 5-year settlement. That's £238 per person diagnosed over the next 10 years. And whilst I don't believe life-changing research should be about a cost-benefit analysis, £238 is nothing compared with the costs of patients being out of the labour market, being treated over years with the wrong thing, successfully or not. And I also want to mention that I know the Lobular Moonshot project is calling on devolved governments to step up as well and to provide £1 million of treatment per year for research to be carried out in their own countries. The Honourable Member for Strangford referenced that too. And I do call on the Scottish Government, the new Scottish Government and the new Cabinet Secretary for Health to look at this ask incredibly seriously. And I'm sure the Minister is going to point out the current NIHR funding round. I do want to preempt that. It is, of course, important, but it isn't the same funding as is needed for the Moonshot project. That funding is available for research in the underlying biology of lobular breast cancer. The research from that funding will still remain weak until we know what it is we are trying to treat. We need funding of the actual underlying biology so that lobular breast cancer can be identified, diagnosed and treated. This will improve outcomes drastically, including reducing the number of people with secondary breast cancer, the topic of today's debate. And I want to end on reflecting that anyone can get cancer, and for many, they will make full recoveries. For some, it is something that they will live with for the remainder of their life, but it will not be the condition from which they die. But what we have heard today is for secondary breast cancer, it will be decisive in terms of their life expectancy. We must let these people know, let these women, men know that they are not alone. Thank you.